Welcome to the Poetry Talks podcast. I'm your host, Seon the Poet. This is the podcast where conversations about poetry come alive, featuring poets, musicians, artists, and other guests who find the poetry in their craft. And they let that poetry do the talking. So let's talk about poetry. And to join the conversation, follow me on social media at Seon the Poet, all one word. What is up, everyone? This is Seon the Poet, your host of the Poetry Talks podcast. And today we have a special episode because we are live and we're also recording this on video. So thank you to our viewers and our listeners. Today is our sixth episode in our second season, and we have none other than Emtima Sowazi. Emtima Sowazi is a poet, an artist, and a leader of the Roots Foundation, the founder of the Roots Foundation, and the host of the Cascadoo Festival. So, without further ado, how are you doing, Emtima?
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and welcome to your listeners and now your viewers.
Yes. So, Emtima, the festival is named Cascadoo, right? Now, for those of us that don't know what that is, can you explain to us what the name and what the significance of the name is and how the festival works?
So, Cascadoo, or the word Cascadoo, or the name Cascadoo, is actually an indigenous catfish to Trinidad and Tobago per se, right? There's a legend, a folklore legend, behind the Cascadoo fish, that anybody who comes to Trinidad and eat of the Cascadoo fish, no matter where in the world they go, they will return to Trinidad to end their days, right? So this festival was actually coined by a friend of mine called Anthony Bansfield from Canada, the Nth Degree. We came together in 2012 after my experience at a festival in 2008 called Brave New Voices. I attended Brave New Voices through an introduction by Marvin George and his wife Camille Commoner.
Yeah.
Right? They introduced me to Brave New Voices, and I attended. And when I saw the energy, the vibration, the togetherness of over 500 youth in the same space, as they say, speaking their truth through spoken word poetry, I wanted to do something like that in Trinidad. You know, I told the executive director of Youth Speaks, that organizes Brave New Voices, I want to bring this to Trinidad. And around that time, I was having conversation with Anthony from Canada.
Yeah.
And he came to Trinidad in 2012. And we had some discussions, and we decided we're going to launch this festival in Trinidad. And he gave it the name Cascadoo. At first, I did not like the name Cascadoo, you know? And this, as the legend goes with the fish, so is the legend with our festival. That once you taste of this festival, you always come back. And we have a theme song, Cascadoo, Cascadoo. It all comes back to Cascadoo. So Cascadoo is a 1-week festival of spoken word poetry, of culture, of arts, of promoting the oral traditions of Trinidad and Tobago, using a global platform for cultural exchange. So we bring poets from all over the world, as far as Australia, South Africa, the US, Canada, Jamaica, Brazil, and they come to Trinidad for 1 week. We have workshops, we have steel band performances, we have open mics, and we have a grand showcase at the end.
And so I noticed, as you mentioned, the week-long festival that goes on in Trinidad. And of course, I know that some of it has been taken virtually because
Yes.
of the pandemic.
Yes.
But I also noticed that we're here in Brooklyn, New York.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit how Cascadoo ended up from Trinidad, being hosted in Trinidad, to this part of it being hosted here?
So this year, 2022, is our 10th edition of Cascadoo. 10 years of hosting this amazing festival. And we were trying to figure out how best to mark this 10th edition of Cascadoo. And through an introduction by you, we met G. Rose, right? The Rose Garden Experience.
Yeah.
Right? So last year we featured the G. Rose Experience virtually on Cascadoo platform. And we started to have discussions that, hey, we want to come to New York, to Brooklyn, New York, to host. Well, at first it was to just visit, because we were going to Brave New Voices, and then we'd have come through to New York and take part in J. Rose programs, like the Rose Garden events or open mics, right? And do a J. Rose experience. Brave New Voices was again virtual this year, a 2-day virtual festival, which we participated in. So we were saying, we need to do something, right? And we decided, hey, let's take Cascadoo to New York. Around that same time, we were introduced to the Festival of New York, because right now, the Festival of New York is going on. It is ending on Labor Day. We signed up, we became a partner of the Festivals of New York. So to celebrate Cascadoo 10 years, this is what we did. We partnered with Gaia the Caribbean, a local television station, and we hosted Cascadoo virtually on that station last week, between the 8th to the 12th. And then we came out to Brooklyn, New York from the 15th to the 21st, to the 20th, to do Cascadoo physically.
So it feels like, it feels like you're getting stronger, as the time goes on, as people, because unfortunately we saw the end of some festivals, a transformation of other festivals. We're still waiting in New York in September for the Poetry Festival to come back. But you guys are not only bringing it forward nationally in Trinidad, but you're bringing it internationally, stateside, and being able to come to New York, being able to come to Brooklyn and do performances and do, round tables and things like that is awesome. I mean, like, how does it feel to take it internationally in this way? Is this the first year that you're taking it internationally?
Yes. Now, it is an international festival, because we bring poets to Trinidad. But it's the first time we actually left the shores of Trinidad and Tobago physically. And you're correct, yes, Seon. We, just like everyone else, when the pandemic hit, we did not know what to do, right? That pandemic, at least it taught me that, yes, we may be on social media, but we did not understand social media, how to actually use this medium to get your work out there, right? As opposed to just posting something and sharing something. You had to now produce for social media. And we sat with a small team, 3 of us.
Yeah.
Isaiah John, Emmanuel Villafan, and myself, right? And we decided what to do, And I told Emmanuel in particular, we have to go online. And his response was, how? And I said, you're a young person, you're going to figure it out, because I don't know how, right? I just did not know how. And, we painstakingly, we really tossed and turned I am proud to see today to your viewers and listeners that last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, as an organization, Roots Foundation, was our strongest years ever. All our programs went online. Not just our festival, Cascadoo, but our workshops, our mentorship program. We did everything online.
And you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that in-person aspect, right? Because you see, you and I are in person, and normally poetry talks happens over the air,
Yeah.
right? But we brought it in person, so it's almost like you're bringing it. It's like you're almost bringing it full circle. The idea that though we lost some of that ability during the pandemic to connect in person, we gained the ability to raise our voice and introduce our voice to a new audience. You know,
You're correct, because virtually you introduced us to J-Rose.
Yeah.
You called me and said, Emtima, you need to meet this person, J-Rose.
And for those that don't know, like J-Rose was actually Poetry Talks' very first guest. So J-Rose always gets free promotion here on Poetry Talks, right? So she always gets free promotion here. But yeah, it was virtually, and she had done events I called Virtual Voices, and I was on some of that as well. And I even launched the podcast here during the pandemic, and met many of my guests on the social media app, the audio app Clubhouse, because they have a very robust community, poetry community.
Yeah.
But as you put it, with Cascadoo, the opportunity for meeting all of these different people from different walks of life, from talking to different poets to talking to, talk about different stories and hearing from people in different walks of life and different locations, that allows you to broaden your perspectives beyond, as you said, your local shores.
Yes.
It allows you to broaden that and hear different styles of poetry. And that's what apps like Clubhouse did for me and Instagram, you know, and that's what I feel that you're kind of coming towards with you doing many of these events now, having done it virtually. And, you know, full disclosure, I taught a workshop for the festival a couple of years back.
Yeah.
And so it's really an honor and a beautiful thing to just have it come back full circle instead of full quarantine, being able to be in person.
Yeah.
And being able to really leverage that strength of the virtual that we're doing.
Because you, as you mentioned, you did a workshop, Advanced Poetics, right? And one of the poets from your workshop is here on this team, right?
Yeah.
Kelsey Brown, right? And the platform we used was manned by Emmanuel Villafana and Isaiah John. Because that was when we were really getting involved and getting to understand this whole thing about Zoom and, you know, how to use the platform to really produce.
Yeah.
Right? And I also want to say that out of that whole pandemic experience, out of that whole Roots experience and trying to understand and, like everyone else, understand this whole social media production, Emmanuel formed a company called Mani Media Studios. So he's doing all things media now, you know?
Yeah. And he is EPing this episode.
Yeah.
Right. So the team is here.
Yes.
And locked and loaded. I'm glad that really it took all of these great individuals as far as the poets and the EP and the guest EP, to be able to see them virtually and then to be able to meet them in person is such an awesome thing. So thank you very much to the team. And I am curious about about how you felt being able to bring this here for the first time, and even how some of the performers felt.
Well, so as I was saying to someone today, you know, people will hear Roots Foundation in New York, Cascadoo in New York. Cascadoo is part of the festivals of New York. Wow, you're big. Seon and your viewers, we literally started from the ground here in Brooklyn, New York, right? We again use virtual emails, WhatsApp to connect to like the libraries, to New York Cafe, but we had to literally be physically here to make that connection concrete.
Absolutely.
So we had a wonderful performance at the Brooklyn Public Library, Bushwick. Right, we did a performance and we engaged some of the young persons there. That was on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And on Friday, we had a poetry circle, right? And coming out of that poetry circle, we had one of the persons performing, right? And saying that, well, actually followed us on social media and pledged that support for Roots Foundation moving forward, right? On the Thursday, we had an amazing performance at the Nurican Cafe, right? And the Nurican Cafe is like the mecca for all poets, right? It is the spot to perform.
Yeah, the New Rican Cafe is like it's almost like it's an institution the way if you're like a listener of rock, like punk rock, it's like CBGB's used to be for them, or like the Apollo was for many, amateur performers that were hoping to make it big. So the New Rican Cafe really is that. Like, and so definitely kudos for getting on that hallowed ground, especially if you're part of the spoken word community.
Yeah, and also where we are actually conducting this interview is at the iconic, and I'll give them a big plug, the iconic New York Moore Hostel, right? And on their website, they advertise that every Wednesday they have something called International Comedy Night, right? But unfortunately, the pandemic literally put a damper on that event. But guess what? We performed Wednesday night at the hostel for the guests in the hostel. So we brought back that cultural vibes to the hostel, and the manager, Adam, was extremely pleased. His guests were extremely happy because as I said, on their website advertised international nights, and they actually had one in August of 2022.
So just as you brought the in-person to Poetry Talks, you brought the in-person
back
to the hostel.
Yes.
So I like just the positivity and the level of community, especially when it comes to poetry, right? That Cascadoo brings. And for those of us that are New Yorkers, the West Indian Day Parade, right, as they call it, or many in the West Indian community would call it Carnival. That was literally started by just a few guys and ladies a few decades ago. It was literally just started by a few people in a room that says, hey, let's see if we can bring the culture and the spirit there. So who knows where Cascadoo would be and so now
I love that analogy. Yeah.
You love it?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Now that you are in your 10th year, right, hosting, and you have brought so much difference to people through the Roots Foundations in their life, right? One of the things I want to ask you is, where do you think the next 10 years, let's say we come back in 2032, where do you think you'd hope to see Cascadoo?
2032, well, I could tell you that in 2022, if someone had asked me that in 2013, where would I see, or how do I see Cascadoo 2022? I would have never thought I would say in New York as part of the New York Festival. So for 2032, wow, I am counting this year, 2022, as year one for New York Cascadoo. This is year one of Cascadoo in New York. So 2032, we're going to celebrate our 10th anniversary of hosting Cascadoo in New York. You know, 20 years in Trinidad and Tobago overall, and 10 years in New York. And, you know, I really love that West Indian festival, because a lot of the iconic festivals, especially in Brooklyn, New York, were really started by a few group of Trinidadians, you know, a small group. And I really see in Cascadoo becoming one of those festivals that people will not just come to Trinidad, right, to participate in, but also come to Brooklyn to be a part of. So in 2023, we're really looking to have Cascadoo in July. So we're going to have it in July in Brooklyn and August in Trinidad and Tobago. And, you know, as we close off Cascadoo 2022 in Brooklyn, we're going to close it off at the Brooklyn Public Library Leonard Branch with an amazing performance and workshop at the garden. They have a beautiful garden setting at the back of the library, and we're going to actually close off this festival there. So I think when we come back in 2023, we'll have more engagements at the libraries, more public engagements. You know, we want to actually have street performances. We want Times Square this week, and we saw how that vibes in Times Square. We could bring some spoken word vibes to that area. You know, we want to go to the parks and have Let Us Speak Green. You know, that's our signature event in Cascadoo in Trinidad. We want to bring Word in the Yard in Brooklyn. That's our pan-yard segment of Cascadoo. So I'm seeing this festival, Seon, and your viewers and listeners, growing from strength to strength, right? And it is built on collaboration, eh? It is built on collaboration.
So definitely, in short, you want to take this festival, this rich oral traditions and literacy festival, to another level.
Yeah.
Here in New York City, and basically joining it with other cultural and iconic institutions and festivals throughout the city.
Yes, yeah. So it will be a staple. Yeah, we come to Labor Day in Brooklyn, we come to Cascadoo in Brooklyn, you know?
Nice. So as we're gonna do that, like the poets are always gonna be the heart of the festival. The
Yes,
artists are always gonna be the heart of the festival. So one of the things I think that we can do before we even meet the poets is tell me a little bit about your artistry and how that fed into this Cascadoo and even Roots.
Well, I've been writing poems as a teenager. You know we always start off with the love poems here, the love poems there. And because of my experience or previous life on the streets, and when I say on the streets, I've been there, done that. I understand gang life, I understand that old drug life. I did not want to be seen as a love poet. I have no issue with love poems, right? But I couldn't really focus on writing how I feel about her when he is dying on the streets, when she is dying on the streets. So I started to use now my words to address serious social issues, drugs, gangs, crimes, the absence of fathers, right? The role of mothers, the amplified role of mothers. So I started to address all these social issues. And that fell into a newsletter, that fell into an annual magazine. You were part of that newsletter back in the days.
Back 10 years ago.
Long, long ago. Because Roots actually started in 2005, right? And as I said, when I got introduced to the Brave New Voices Festival, we were actually doing a poetry slam called Roots Poetry Slam. It was brought back in the pandemic by Isaiah and Emmanuel, right? And as between 2005 to 2022, it is obvious that we would have undergone a lot of change, evolution. Some things worked, some things didn't work. And as we are right now here in this space, we have 3 main programs that fall under Roots Foundation. We have festivals, and the main festival is Cascadoo. But we also have an open mic called Take the Stage. We also have a Roots Poetry Slam, right? So they fall under festivals. We have interventions, and our main intervention is called Abyssinia, a journey of change, which focuses on gang violence, gender-based violence, those issues that sort of crippling the young person's growth, right, and development. Because when we were younger, yes, these things were wrong, but how it is now, it has engulfed our young people. Young men are being funneled into gang life, right? As early as teenage relationships, you have gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, right? So we want to address those issues through our intervention. But we have other intervention programs, like we do robotics, we do mentorship programs, right? And then we have media, the third area. And under media, we have a program called Beyond the Lens, where we do photography, filmmaking. So we have these 3 programs that now make up what Roots do, right? And I'm saying this now, making a plug on your show, Seon. We are in the stage of starting our own school. It will be called Roots Cafe, Creative Academy for Edutainment, where we're going to bring all these programs under a model called STREAM. We know STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We have STREAM, storytelling, training, reading, entrepreneurship, arts, and mentorship. That is the vision moving forward for Roots Foundation.
Wow, thank you. And thank you for definitely debuting that on the show and telling us what we're going to be doing here and what the future of Roots is going to look like. And as we talked about the poets and the poetry being at the heart of it and you starting as an artist, I think we can get ready to start meeting some of these poets that have come with you all this way to share their voice with us, not only here in New York, but our listeners all over the world. Shout outs to the listeners in Europe, because right behind the United States, we've got Germany and the UK really tuning into Poetry Talks podcast as well. So I just want to shout our listeners out there as well. Welcome back to the Poetry Talks podcast. And for my viewers, you're going to notice that there are a lot more people on the stage and at the table here with me. And I said in the last segment that the poets are the heart of the festival. And so we have 3 of them, especially if we're not counting our host of Cascadoo. We have 3 of these poets that are here with us. So Emsma, would you like to talk about the poets that you've brought along with you and the poets that we have here?
Yes, thank you, Seon. And again, welcome back to your viewers and listeners. So at Cascadoo 2022, Cascadoo is 10. And, I need to say this before we continue. Every year we have a theme. So Cascadoo is 10 is that Cascadoo is trailblazing, Cascadoo is edutaining, and Cascadoo is, as you would see and experience, nostalgic. Cascadoo is 10. So we brought to New York a whole, as we say, Trini vibes, a whole Trini culture. We brought a real experience. We have, like for instance, myself, I did a Peregrinaud. So we had Peregrinaud performances, and we had spoken word performances with a flavor of rap so in between. We have 5 poets. We brought to Cascadoo is 10. 3 on set. One is resting a bit, our lone queen, and I'm really sorry that she's not physically here at the set, right? To really add that flavor to this interview. And one is behind the cameras, right? So our cameraman is a poet, or our poet
is a cameraman. You know, one thing, I don't know if you had noticed, but anyone who was really looking at me on Instagram, they knew that back in 2019, I used to say poetry and everything. That was my hashtag that I used on everything, poetry and everything. And so yes, even in camera work and executive production, there is poetry there. Because if you can't mix the sound, then no one's gonna want to listen. Yeah. So, but also he is he's mean poet. A prolific poet. He is a mean and prolific and badass poet. I've heard him. And you know what, maybe, listen, I might be a little biased because he was in my class. But before all of that, he was an amazing poet. I think just being part of the class was just amazing as well. So thank you.
Yes, and for the viewers, that is Emmanuel Villafana. You know, it's the only way you might be able to see him is if he poke his head in front of the camera, right?
Yeah.
And absent is our queen, Kelsey Brown, right? And shout out and real props to Kelsey Brown. So we have on set to my right, my immediate right, is not only a poet, but in terms of Roots Foundation, is our community and intervention coordinator. Right, so all our intervention programs, he is the person that coordinates those programs. You know, Isaiah John started off back in 2015, right? So the interesting thing about it is that Emmanuel started with us in 2014. So Cascadoo, if you could check back from 10, began in 2013. Emmanuel came on in 2014 and brought on his partner, Michael Ogie, who brought on Isaiah John. And Isaiah John came in 2015, and both of them, including Logie, right, but Isaiah and Emmanuel stayed consistent from 2014 to 2015. So we have Isaiah John started off as a poet and then advanced to a teaching artist, and now he's a coordinator within the program. And to his right, if you're making a U-turn, right, or opposite him, and I wonder if this is kind of biased, but opposite Isaiah is his cousin, Brandon Butcher, you know, and Brandon came through our Roots Poetry Slam. I did not know they were related. Isaiah just told me, Tima, it have a youth, you have to look out for him. Brandon Butcher. So, okay. And I didn't really pick up Butcher's and Isaiah's aunt. You know, this is Gloria Butcher. And then he said, I'm a cousin. And I said, okay. And you know, we have Brandon Butcher came through Roots Poetry Slam. And to Brandon's right, we're going right or wrong. To Brandon's right is another Roots Poetry Slam alumni, right? Jabari Collins. So Jabari Collins, Brandon Butcher, Kelsey Brown are just 3 of 6. The other 3 are not here with us in New York. They are Alexandra Douglas. We have Ray Clark. Ray Clark is the reigning champion of Roots Poetry Slam. I have a kind of Boy, I don't know, it have a kind of thing going on. Never go talking, but men out for a clock, boy, you know.
Listen, when you're the king of the hill, someone's always chasing you. When you're champ, everyone wants the belt. So.
And then we have, I think, another Douglas, Tevin Douglas.
Not related.
Not related to Alexandra Douglas, but Tevin. Listen, when you look at Tevin, and then you hear Tevin, you will jump because his size and his height, he has a tone like a Barry White. You know, I'm Tevin Douglas, you know.
A baritone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have, say, Isaiah, I'd like to know.
Mm.
Let Isaiah say more about his role here, you know, and how his experience.
Yeah, I want to hear about your experience, and I'm sure my listeners will want to hear about that and your artistry. Yeah. So if you'd give a little bit of an intro, a little sample, it'd be great.
A sample of what? Like what?
We can give us. I'm gonna ask you for a sample of the poetry later on.
Oh, all right.
But I wanted to just make sure that I got you a little prepared for that, but also I just want to know about your artistry and.
Well,
your experience.
as everybody can see, my name is Isaiah John. Said it like 4, 5, 6 times. With me, I tend to write artistry. I tend to write from things I go through, lived experiences. I don't really deal with things that I don't go through or tend to, because I like to be authentic as possible and write things that are true to me. True to the ground, true to the home, true to the zone where I live. You know, some people could say, well, yeah, boy, kind of like a ghetto prophet, you know, R.I.P. Rebel, the real ghetto prophet. But yeah, it's the work that I put across, I would say is raw. It's very raw, very, you know, gritty. I like a gritty style of poetry. More. Nothing to do with roses or flowers, nothing flowery to that extent. But yeah, and well, I've been working in Roots Foundation since the age of 15. I would really say 16, because in 2015, MTM actually, you know, had an argument with me. And yeah, tell the people if I'm wrong. Tell them now.
Well, I want to hear.
Argument with me. Was like, Ted, you're too wild. Only you had to grow up. I was a 15-year-old. You know, I was a 15-year-old. So, and then after that, a lot of things came to me where I had to, you know, just step up in life at home. And it's just like the switch just came. And the next time I saw him, was like, but that's nice, yeah. That's a whole different person, whole different personality, whole different energy. Because it's not that the talk or the you know, that it thing, but because I was like, all right, cool, yeah, I get curled with small thing, everybody just get curled with. But you know, after that, like circumstance and a lot of different things. But you don't let circumstance dictate your pace in life. You just have to switch and level up. As certain people say.
And that's such a positive message. You do not have to let a circumstance dominate your life.
Definitely.
You know, and I feel that a lot of times as an artist, right, the circumstance is seeped so much into our art that we may not take the lessons from that or take the positivity from that. So I appreciate your mentioning that, Isaiah, and just hearing about your story as you starting from being one of the youths to being an integral part of the organization is truly inspiring. Yeah. And as a poet and a spoken word artist yourself, you know, you always have friends at Poetry Talks. So thank you definitely for sharing that.
No problem.
All right. And you also have the gentleman Brandon here. Brandon, I have not been able to hear your poetry yet, but I know, especially when I get to see some of the events from Cascadoo and I get to talk to you a little bit more here, I may have the opportunity. So thank you, but I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do want to ask you a little bit about your artistry and just how you feel about being here and what it's been like for you with Cascadoo.
Oh wow! Well, this is honestly an experience. I've actually started writing poetry a year ago, and it honestly has been a journey because my cousin would always say or encourage me to continuously write. And I would write and never really take part in competitions, but the RPS came around, the Roots Poetry Slam came around, and they decided that I'll try. I did try, and it was wonderful and remarkable. From there, I came third place, and I got the opportunity to be placed on the Brave New Voices team, and it was wonderful. And I decided from day on out that I was going to take poetry seriously. Now, in terms of my artistry, currently I'm trying to find a style or trying to find a particular path to go down as a poet. So my poems are diverse. It's from love to social issues to breakup poems. It's very diverse at the moment. However, it is not just surface level. It deals with a lot of depth and integral part of the human experience. So definitely, yeah.
You know, I can't help, and like the inner teacher in me, as you mentioned that doing it for a year or having started poetry for a year, trying to get more serious. One of the best ways to improve the craft, and that's for anyone, right? One of the best ways to improve the craft. And you went, as you said, you went from last year not doing poetry to this year doing poetry and being champion, right? So you might be able to tell me a little something too. But when you're doing your craft, always read expository books on the craft as well. So I would suggest something like On Writing, a memoir of the craft. And that's a Stephen King that's more about writing fiction. But gives you a lot of useful gems in that book. The Poet's Glossary is another book that's actually kind of a thick book. But that's another book worth getting and worth looking at to sort of really get further understandings. And I know offline after the episode is over, I can always, point you in the direction of some things that will help you in your craft. But, I believe that the poem is really telling the story that is in your soul. So if you are diverse in your style, it speaks to a lot of diverse experience and imaginings. So thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
So
now, next, we have
Jabari
Collins, right? Jabari Collins is a poet there with Roots as well. So, Jabari, I want to know again about your artistry, what brought you to the organization, and just how you feel about being part of this 10th anniversary of Cascadoo.
So I came to the Roots Foundation very similarly to Brandon, in that I only joined up with them last year through the same Roots Poetry Slam. The issue, not an issue really, my situation was that I was just a couple points behind Brandon in that slam. I came fourth while he came third, but it's been a battle ever since.
You've done Batman.
But it's been a great journey, a great experience. Met a lot of great people in this, and that's something I really came to appreciate with the space. I feel very like it's a family. Even people just meeting people, I feel very happy about being in this space. And in regards to my artistry, I'm quite opposite to Isaiah in that I speak a lot on other people's experiences. I only recently turned 18, so I haven't lived as many experiences as one might. I often feel like if I haven't lived enough to write anything else. but I found a lot of myself in telling other people's stories, listening to people, talking to people, and being a voice for others. But also, actually, no, continuing on being a bit of a foil to Isaiah, where he would say that he's in very flowery. It's become a bit of a inside joke, I guess, or a recurring thing in among us that I am very sound very sophisticated in my poetry. I love to do a lot of eloquence and wordplay, and I'm very stuck in metaphors, similes. I like to use a lot of literary devices. I love to put in a little wordplay here and there in it.
So you're more of a technical sphere.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that I'm seeing around the table different styles, different elements, and different willingness to, challenge the order, challenge the champ, and also willingness to dig more into yourself as a poet. So before we get on with the time that we do have, I would like to get a sample, and I'm sure my audience would like to get a sample of poetry from our guests here for Cascadoo 2022. And we're back to our last segment of the Poetry Talks episode with our friends from Cascadoo and the Cascadoo Festival, the first one in New York. And we're going to be talking about poetry. And by talking, this is the podcast for Poetry Talks. So we're going to go with the poetry. But since we have 4 guests with us, we're going to do things differently. We're going to give a sample of their poetry and encourage you to follow them on social media and wherever you find them in order to take a deeper dive into their work, into their artistry, and into their life stories. So without further ado, let us start with Jabari.
So when I say I want to scream your name to the world, what I mean is I want to whisper it for only you to hear. And whenever you hear me proclaim in my speech that you were there in my dreams, well, read between the lines. Because the truth is you're always on my mind, but very rarely in my dreams you see. Every time we meet, I see exactly what I dreamt of in you. So I knew I shouldn't try to paint a picture in my head that couldn't hold a feather to your figure, that would struggle with a match, much less be able to hold a candle to your light. I couldn't bear the sight of even my dreams as they changed their gait to match your movement, only for you to decimate any routine we have practiced to perfection with a single step in any direction of your choosing. Game set and match with them left losing, and me left to catch my breath.
Wow, thank you for that sample, Jabari. And to any of my female listeners, his Instagram is going to be in the show notes. All right, so maybe you might get into the DMs if you type Poetry Talks. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. All right. So our next poet we have is this year's champion.
Third place.
This year's 3rd place. I'm sorry.
Hello, Rick. Don't make Rick like yet.
Sorry about.
Well, Brandon, you mind speaking in the beard?
Soon to be.
Right? I mean, listen. The thing about it is he's saying I'm a freshman in this poetry game, and I already jumped and got the bronze medal. So if you're a freshman, we're looking for that silver in sophomore year and that gold in your junior year.
That's right.
All right. So, Mr. Brandon, let's see what you got for us.
All right. I am not ashamed to say that the best gift I ever received was from my ex. Yes, though it wasn't something tangible, I believe my satisfaction from that present honestly makes me look forward to the next time that we meet, a longing in my soul for another lesson that she could teach. I mean, even though sometimes it seems she seeks to make me weak, I still say it's all about perspective. So not because I was left alone means that I was neglected. No, she ever so often comes back and check in, gifting me with her presence, a present that is honestly not worth rejecting because I learned from it. Now, I know this poem might get a lot of question because I mean, how could your best gift be from an ex when most normal people usually press fast forward and move on instead of reminisce? And no, it's not at a banker I catch. And no, I'm not in my feelings as some might suggest. It's just, I really love this gift this girl gave to me, in fact. Thank you.
Oh, God!
Okay, so we went from falling in love to not being the ex. So we've really kind of just come full circle and back.
That's
with just those last two, and that's just a sample.
They didn't complete those poems, is it?
No, not at all. And this is a sample of the artistry, right? Now again.
So wait, Seon, sorry to cut you.
Yeah.
So if your viewers and listeners want to hear the ending of those poems, what do they need to do?
They're gonna need to go on, follow him on social media. They're gonna need his Instagram is gonna be in the show notes, right? So all I just need to do is have it in the show notes, and it's gonna be there. So if you're interested, now I don't know, maybe some of my female listeners, if you want to be his ex, his Instagram is in the show notes. So, because I mean, you guys just spitting that raw fire, and I appreciate it because poetry is a drug, and when you get that sample, you just want to hear all of it. So I can't wait for the viewers and the listeners to check in with you and hear more of your gifts. Thank you very much, Brandon. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no.
And now we have Isaiah, who is ready to grace us.
You see, this box is the block because these four corners is all we are accustomed to. Because when you're trapped in a system, no matter how far you run, there's always a coroner waiting on the corner to examine you. I dreaming, I not scared, I see things, men turn cold in my hands already, bare badness, because when it's drilling time with guns out, put the nozzle in your mouth, now all that gun talk about, we use scare tactics, run racket, but when that last bullet impaled, that was the last nail in the coffin, I don't like it here. But you see, here is where deepest fears come true. Here lies Big Shutter had a lot of potential, but potential only got me laying at attention. Hopefully I'm no real soldiers in attendance. Hope my family get my estate. Watch my state, wasn't even a soldier, but even real G's get a lie in state. Give my 21 gun salute and dance with my body after 8:30 in the night, or dance until you all see daylight because you're lost without me. My death is a celebration just like those who go on before me. So I want all to remember all the house I built, all the innocent people, all the I kill. Yeah.
You know, it's good that you mentioned that the last word in that sample was killed, because you killed that. Right? I mean, if we're just going on word count alone, I think I lost count. But you tell a real story of a pervasive street violence that we see all over the world. We see it here. We're reckoning it with here in New York, and it's become sadly a grim epidemic in Trinidad. So, thank you.
Top 10 in per capita. That's crazy. So,
and it doesn't need to be like that.
Exactly.
So I really want to thank you for bringing that realness, bringing that fire, bringing that flow, and I know a lot of people on Clubhouse that would love to have each and every one of you in their rooms, as well as having you in my room on Clubhouse as well. So anyone that wants to tap in with Isaiah, what's going to happen? His Instagram is going to be where? in the show notes. Come on, guys. All right, it's gonna be in the show notes.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear more of the stories, hear more of this realness, more of this rawness, please. And to my female listeners, if you need a philosopher, his Instagram is in the bio, is in the show notes, and none other than the great and inimitable Emtima Sewazi is going to grace us with some of his amazing poetry. I've been listening to this man's poetry for about 12 years now. So to my listeners and viewers, if this is your first time hearing Emtima, his info is going to be in the show notes as well.
Now, viewers, if I have one fan in the world, it's Seon and I really appreciate that. So we are here in Brooklyn, New York, in Bushwick community to be exact. And when we touched down on Saturday night into Sunday morning, 3:30 a.m., Isaiah, John and myself, we were walking through the projects. And I started to feel at home. Why? Based on the poem Isaiah just said, that's the life we are accustomed to, unfortunately, back in Trinidad. And that's the life that I knew. And whilst walking through that project, I started to feel a bit nostalgic. And I started to wonder. Sometimes I stop and wonder what it is to wonder. Look at my condition. I just smile and have to ponder. I'm poor. I'm poor. I have no wealth. I should have been rich. And then I stopped and I wondered if I had money, I might switch. Sometimes I stop and wonder what it is to wonder. Look at where I live, in the ghetto. It's the gutter. And then I stopped and I wondered, suppose I had house and land. The poor and needy people, their plight I won't understand. Sometimes I stop and wonder what it is to wonder. To drive a nice car, a Beamer or a Hummer. And then I stopped and I wondered, if I did, what would I do? I will drive all day any condition and pass you and you and you. Sometimes I stop and wonder what it is to wonder. Is this my fate or a test or a blessings from Allah in saving me from my nafs, my whims and my fancy, to love and care for the weak and less fortunate all around me? I wonder. I wonder. I wonder. Sometimes I stop and wonder.
Emtima, every time I hear that
Yeah,
poem,
really like that word.
every time I hear that poem, first of all, it's two things. Every time I hear that poem, you almost deliver it just slightly differently. And it always runs chills down my spine. I feel it's such a relatable poem that tells such a realistic story of what it is to wonder if your life was somewhat different.
Yeah.
But many times your life circumstances and how you persevere and overcome them, which I felt I've gotten from that poem, many times that is what determines your character. So I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on, sharing your time with me, sharing your festivals, and sharing your poetry, at least be a sample for our listeners, right? And to my female listeners, Emtama's social media is in the show notes, but it is not for you. He is married. So with that,
But I'm a Muslim.
yes.
Whoa!
Crazy.
I know my sister-in-law. I don't think she wants any co-wives. So I want to thank everyone for joining us on this first video episode, for coming and laughing with us, enjoying poetry, and learning more about Cascadoo and the Cascadoo Festival, and understanding what the future will hold for this festival from Trinidad to Brooklyn, through the rest of the United States and beyond. So with all that, I thank you for joining me on the podcast where poetry talks. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Poetry Talks podcast. And don't forget to follow, like, or subscribe to Poetry Talks where you get your podcasts so that you won't miss an episode. And to join the conversation, follow me on Twitter, Clubhouse, or Instagram at Seon the Poet. All one word. See you next time where poetry talks.